Welcome, everyone, to Informed Dissent. I'm Jamie Reed, a whistleblower, a mom of five, and the co-executive director of the LGB Courage Coalition. We are, interestingly now, proudly a gay-led podcast. Lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, standing for truth, science, and compassion. So each week, we're going to look at what's happening across the gender landscape and have a little bit more of a tie-in about what it means for LGB people and everyone who cares about evidence-based medicine. With me this week are the co-hosts, Lauren Leggieri, lesbian advocate who we introduced last week. If you missed that show, please check it out. And Cori Cohn, a gentleman of trans experience, writer and advocate who brings rare clarity and courage to this conversation. Cori, you have the floor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. About a month ago, I resigned from a podcast called Informed Dissent because we had some lack of agreement about our mission and direction, and I thought it was just easier to step backwards and let it get sorted out. And what has happened is, like a phoenix, another bird of the same name and appearance has taken its place. So I am part of a reborn or rebirthed podcast, which is taking on the same label. I consider this sort of the beginning of a new project, though. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Cori. We are going to jump into some of the news of the week before we get into our deeper dive. Lauren, I think you were going to start us out with some interesting words from Pete Buttigieg.
Yes. So Pete Buttigieg, our former transportation secretary, condemned efforts to drop the T. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg made headlines last week after calling efforts to drop the T from LGB Alliance, quote, a terrible and a betrayal of the movement's shared history. He told YouTuber Andrew Callahan the transgender people were central to early gay liberation, and even criticized the quiet removal of trans references from Stonewall National Monument website, calling it a symbolic act of erasure. Shut up, Pete. Shut up.
We added some commentary. This week, we also saw the Supreme Court hear the case Childs versus Salazar. The oral arguments were heard in the case challenging Colorado's 2019 ban of so-called conversion therapy for minors. The plaintiff, therapist Kaylee Childs, argues that the law censors her ability to provide talk therapy for families who want to discuss same-sex attraction or gender incongruence without immediately affirming it. The state's attorney general says the ban protects kids from harm. On the surface, this looks like a free speech case, but underneath is something deeper and a little bit harder to look at, and we're going to try to unpack this case next week.
All right, so hold our comments until then.
Yes.
I will say, I don't know if notes have already been prepared for this, but at minimum, we should link out to oyez.org, oyez.org, so that people can listen to the argument along with the beautiful transcript that updates live. So it's an excellent resource if you haven't heard of it before.
Excellent.
However, I was at the Genspect Conference last week, the week before last. Time is going too fast for me to catch up. And they revealed, Genspect, by the way, it's an international network of clinicians, researchers, parents, therapists, and they advocate for ethical, exploratory approaches to gender-related distress. This means let's not pump kids full of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, basically. They released a statement while I was there, and they were calling for a complete reevaluation of how the DSM defines gender identity. The DSM is the Diagnostic, what's the
Statistical manual.
Yes, you're right. So this is what lists all the mental health conditions in it and provides how you diagnose these things. So they argued that gender dysphoria is not a real diagnosis, but what they call an ideological placeholder, made up category that opens the door to experimental medicine, and they suggest instead of calling it dysphoria, they should treat it with a similar psychiatric condition called extreme overvalued belief, which is like an obsession or fixation. And I guess one of the reasons why it's a bit controversial is that this is a fairly recent term, is my understanding. So in the sense issuing that news or opinion from Genspect, they've released a couple of follow-ups, an FAQ and another clarification. So I think this was a pretty radical suggestion, and they are working to try to cover all their bases.
And we're going to do a deep dive into that today.
Okay, in other news from Canada, a new Canadian study this week looked at what researchers are calling detransphobia, the discrimination and social rejection faced by people who detransition. The study found that many detransitioners avoid medical care altogether because they fear being shamed or dismissed. Some doctors refuse to treat them, even for unrelated health issues. It's a stunning reversal. The same people once celebrated as brave are now silenced for changing their minds.
And then just this morning, we saw a story drop from the New York Times. So I am currently on Pacific Standard Time. Lauren and I are out in the Pacific Northwest on a kind of a speaking tour. And I happened upon this article at 4 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which was a very eye-opening way to wake up. So the title was Iran lures transgender foreigners for surgery, but forces operations on locals. I immediately wanted to know who wrote this article. And when I checked, this is a member of the 2025-2026 Times Fellowship class. This is a group of journalists who are new in their career. It's a program for early journalists. And I am...
Wait, so you're saying nobody warned this guy? What are you stepping
I
at?
think it's a woman, and I'm just worried that nobody warned her what she was stepping. I don't know. That's just speculation. A lot of tweets immediately came out in response to this article. I'm going to read two paragraphs that Lior Sapir highlighted this morning in his tweet. Also, if you're not on Twitter, or if you are on Twitter, a lot has been discussed about the visual appearance of one of the surgeons, the photograph of one of the surgeons that was in the story. Lior commented that it looks like Morpheus changed his career path after Neo defeated the Matrix. That's what this guy looks like. Cori, you saw his picture before I read these paragraphs. Any thoughts on this guy as your surgeon?
Well, he looks like a loan shark.
From Iran.
Even in the photo, which is ostensibly his office, the horizontal blinds are all damaged and crazy looking. So it really looks like the back office type of dingy, dirty crime family type of setting from like The Sopranos or something.
This photo is, we should put it in the show notes. The photo is amazing. Okay, but on a serious note, these are the two paragraphs that Lior highlighted, and he wrote, this is one astonishing pair of paragraphs from the New York Times, and I'm going to read it. Iran is one of the few places in the Muslim world that allows transgender people to seek gender-affirming care and even subsidizes it. For many foreigners traveling to Iran for transition surgery, and indeed for many transgender Iranians, these operations can feel life-saving. But the country's reputation as a pioneer in the field belays the abusive history of the operations and the grim reality for most LGBTQ people there. In Iran, gay men and lesbians can be punished by public flogging and the death penalty. As a result, the United Nations Human Rights Council found many gay and lesbian Iranians who are not trans are pressured into undergoing gender reassignment surgery without their free consent. thoughts on this article? Because I was shocked it was there. I was absolutely shocked this was in the New York Times.
Yeah, I was shocked it was there. They almost got it. They do insinuate that it's homosexuals who are being forced to transition. Like, they almost really put it all together. I think we all know why Iran promotes gender affirming care. It's because homosexuality is illegal.
Do you think do you think that they didn't make the leap, but they knew that smart readers would infer it?
I mean, I think if this journalist was actually in Iran, this is an open secret. I mean, they know that this is ostensibly gay conversion therapy. I mean, I had a friend that had dinner with a few of her Iranian friends a few years ago, and they were talking about gays and how they differed on their opinions about gays, and the Iranian man was like, but we let them have the surgeries. So, I mean, in Iran, they understand that what they're doing is trying to convert homosexuals to blend in.
Yeah, maybe. Do they do this to women or just men?
Yeah, no, they do.
Both. Yeah.
It's sort of interesting that they would socially elevate females.
Oh, into the category of male.
Right.
I don't know that they really do. Like, I don't actually think that you are benefiting too much from this. There was a trans man from Iran in the article that talked about, you're still not accepted. I mean, if people know, you're not going to have a great time.
That's why you have to keep it secret.
I'm not on Blue Sky. I'm not really engaged with how some of the trans activists are. I mean, they hate the New York Times, but I don't know how they're going to respond to this article. This shocked me, and yeah. Okay, let's pivot. Let's go to two conferences. So Lauren and I were at the SEGM conference in Berlin, and Lauren and Cori were at the Genspect Conference in Albuquerque. Both conferences occurred in about the last 2 weeks. An interesting thing is that it appears that a similar conversation happened at both conferences, and I don't know if it was intentional or if it just kind of manifested. But at the SEGM conference in Berlin, and SEGM is the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, the SEGM conference it's different from the Genspect conference. It's meant for clinicians. There's not this kind of just free for all, you can't just buy a ticket. But SEGM is a professional group of clinicians and researchers who are seeking or looking for evidence base around any gender approaches to interventions. The final panel of their 4-day conference was titled "The Case for a New Diagnosis." Lauren, this was the first SEGM conference you were at. What were your overall impressions?
Of just this last panel where they were discussing this?
No, just in general. You'd been to a Genspect conference, you've been to WDI conferences. This was your first SEGM. What did you think, just kind of in general?
I was very happy with the amount of discussion there was about the link between homosexuality and a later trans identification. They really kind of, a number of clinicians talked about this. I think there was a panel about homosexuality and the link between a trans identification. So I was happy that people are discussing it. Overall, I mean, I get very frustrated with the therapy talk. I just feel like therapists would talk in circles and circles and circles around stuff forever. And I think I came out of that conference just feeling like if we're ever going to let the therapeutic field do its job again and help people, we have to remove the medical pathway. Like they're never going to be able to do their jobs until this medical pathway is off the table, because it will just be dancing around the issue and biding time, because this is always going to be a thing in someone's head. Like, this is an option, this is an option, this is an option. And it's, so I don't know how therapists are ever going to walk people. Maybe maybe they can help some, but like, again, I just feel like until it's off the table, the mental health workers, their hands are tied in a lot of ways.
Well, you just go to Iran. It won't be off the table.
Yeah, or yeah, you can just go with Iran. Great. Helpful.
Yeah.
So this final panel, first I have to admit that I was not on it, but I had to get up.
Well, you kind of were.
I maybe kind of inserted myself into it. Okay, so the final panel is this discussion about what, the case for new diagnosis. So really it was a conversation about what potentially belongs in the DSM. What I found really interesting, so the DSM decides who gets treatment, who gets insurance coverage, who gets labeled, what are the labels. Like it's the way that psychiatrists basically are able to bill for what they do. One note that'll come up, I think, later is that a number of the people on the panel at the SEGM conference had participated in previous DSM iterations. They were part of the conversations about what was from 4 to 5. Like there were a number of people in the room who actually had taken part in this before. So at that conference, I got up and I said that the DSM should only include 2 things related in any way to gender. So I said fetishes, because they're measurable sexual phenomenon. It's been in the DSM. It should stay in the DSM. There are some people who we know have small group fetish that should be in there because they probably need some sort of psycho treatment. And then I said the rapid onset group should not be named that, but we can still treat some of those kids who are in real distress under somatization disorders. But then I got really preachy and I was kind of arguing everything else, gender identity, gender nonconformity, anything under the guise of gender that really is talking about homosexuality should be completely removed. If we don't, psychiatry will keep pathologizing gay and lesbian development. Lauren, you were sitting there when I made that statement. What kind of reaction do you think there was?
I mean, for me, I agree with you. There are these 3 groups, right? But again, if the medical option wasn't on the table, would a lot of these ROGD kids be in such distress? Would these young gay kids be in such distress? Even the guys with the fetish, would they all be perseverating on this one goal if there wasn't a medical option? I don't think that they would.
Cori.
Well, I know that I have an extreme minority position here, but I tend to see a lot of this as being culture bound, and a lot of our definitions around even what gay and lesbian are cultural definitions. They're anchored to this time and place because there are different forms of same-sex interactions, sexual interactions that have happened all throughout time and even presently all throughout the world that are not what we consider gay and lesbian in this conversation. So trying to describe that ever as any form of mental illness, as we have done in the past in the United States and in the West, was mistaken. And I think similarly, when we're talking about gender identity, that is also extremely culturally bound.
Mm.
It only makes sense when you have a bunch of other assumptions that are anchored into this time and place to support it to make any sense of it. So I don't have a lot of, I don't have a horse in the race, because what we diagnose as mental illnesses or mental disorders, I'm getting further and further away from believing that whole taxonomy has as much validity as I thought it did even 10 years ago.
I think that
Yeah.
is an excellent point. And I think that brings us to a little bit of the background that I kind of wanted to get into, talking a little bit more about the DSM. So one of the things we have now is we have two kind of producers helping us work on the show. And one of them I tasked with, can you help us do some background research about how the DSM gets written, how it came into fruition? Heather put together a lot of really good resources for us on that. So basically, it appears that the DSM, okay, and Lauren is now going to wave her hands around because she's in a room.
Sorry.
To turn off the lights. Okay. Talk with your hands more.
I don't think I'm setting it off. Anyway, I'll just get up when the lights go off.
Okay.
It's a podcast anyway. No one is looking at us.
I don't think that's true. I'm looking at Cori's amazing hat. Okay. So DSM, we're on version 5. So during the DSM-3 era, its own architects, when they're writing that, basically just completely admitted most new diagnoses have no biological basis, no consistent evidence. Essentially, the way that the DSM gets written or a new category is added is by what they call clinical consensus. So meaning a small committee of psychiatrists get in a room, they take a vote on what they feel like is important. And I think the thing that's really important to remember is the people that are taking that vote are
all crazy?
No,
are all crazy people? Oh, okay. That wasn't what you were going to say?
No, I was going to say that they are taking a vote about what an outside payer will have to then pay them to do. There is a financial driver behind all of this, that if they want to talk to patients about this new diagnosis, they can code it and then get paid to do that. I think that payee system makes psychiatry incredibly vulnerable to cultural shift and political pressures. So I know a lot of other people have talked about the shift from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria is the big thing that happened in DSM-5 that wasn't grounded in new research. I think there's some consensus that that was a political move, that it happened because of WPATH. That shifted the focus away from therapy towards medical transition, treating a subjective sense of identity as a medical condition. I thought a couple things historically were interesting to look at through this. So Dr. Paul McHugh at Johns Hopkins has said that psychiatry is still a discipline that has not come of age. All it's doing is labeling symptoms instead of investigating causes. He argues that true ethical medicine must be evidence-based, not driven by cultural fads or ideological capture. And then another interesting contribution, Dr. James Davies, who is a British anthropologist in psychotherapy, adds another layer to the critique. He wrote a book called Cracked: Why Psychiatry is Doing More Harm Than Good. And he traces how the DSM in the 1950s had just over 100 diagnoses. So there was like 110 diagnoses in the 1950s. By the 1990s, there were 300 diagnoses. Most of that grew exponentially just out of this consensus process. He calls this the rise of the medical industrial complex, where expanding diagnostic categories create also the markets for the drugs that are being developed rather than, devising better care of patients. Davies points out that the psychiatry shift in the 1980s, this was under DSM-3, replaced depth psychology with a symptom counting model that served insurance companies and pharmaceutical firms. And he estimates that this system now fuels a mental health industry that is projected to reach $6 trillion by 2030. His argument is that much of what gets labeled as an illness is actually a social or existential response to life, not a pathology. When I read that, I immediately thought, Cori, of you, your talk at Genspect, this concept of an existential crisis. Hearing all of that, what do you think that just continues to lead credibility to where your thinking is?
I mean, it's validating to hear that as a complete layperson in this, that there's a professional that's echoing some ideas that I thought were not original, but did not come from outside influence. That's nice to hear.
And we're using this word cultural, social, like society. All of this is kind of circling around and almost comes back to what Genspect put out, which is the idea that potentially what we're getting at is that our cultures are ill, that the illness is at a cultural level. And the DSM is a book, though, that deals with how paid mental health providers interact with the individual. So I continue to wonder, I don't wonder. Some part of me thinks potentially we should just burn the DSM-5, not create a DSM-6, and go back to whatever iteration there was that only had 100 things in it and make sure homosexuality isn't in there. Lauren, you picture.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that like they're taking symptoms and calling them conditions. You know, I mean, you could, I mean, some of this stuff is like, let's create something called left shoeism, where like people perseverate on the fact that they can't have their foot enclosed in a shoe. Like this stuff is crazy. Like the inmates are running the asylum.
No, but that thing that you just said, I have that, Lauren.
Yeah, me too. But you can't wear a left shoe, and also now it's your civil right to never have to wear that left shoe.
Yeah, I want to be put in the
barefoot.
right shoe prison if I get in trouble.
Let me ask a personal question that, or maybe I'll tell a personal story and then ask the question. Have any of you received a diagnosis out of the DSM? Cori, did you receive a?
Yeah. When I was 15, I don't remember exactly what it was. I thought that it was gender identity disorder, but somebody a couple of years ago said that was new in DSM-4, but then there's like these provisional things that don't actually get added to the DSM that are sort of like suggest, like I don't know what it was, but it was either gender identity disorder or transsexualism.
Does it make you think about that diagnosis that you had at that time? Do you think that you were in distress that warranted somebody being paid to assist you in your distress?
Can you I mean, I was in distress. I was factually in distress. So I needed help. I was in a really bad position mentally and socially. But I think it was better. I think it was easier for adults to put me under somebody's care and give them directions to fix it than it was to, like, I was in a dysfunctional system. I was inside of a dysfunctional system. I was being injured by a system that I could not, how do you even put this? I was being injured by the system. So I was factually being hurt by the system I was in.
The system being the mental health system, the psychiatric, or the system being like the cultural soup? Like which system?
The family system, the school system,
Okay.
everything in my life that was all of my social context, all of it had elements that were broken or busted.
I think that that's actually really critical because one of the issues that I have or had with giving kids a mental health diagnosis of any kind is often that what that label is it's basically just a label put on a child where it's really just describing exactly what you said, the system around the child is broken or not functioning in some way. One of the things with the kind of trans kids that I was seeing in the clinic, even when I was there, I wasn't thinking of this in terms of these are like the ROGD cohort. But one of the things I found really challenging was one of the through lines with so many of these kids is their parents were not parenting. And when I would talk to the kids, especially around the use of social media, which you didn't have an iPhone when you were in that distress. This is more personal, one-on-one, your family.
No, I had a rotary phone.
Okay. So I would have these kids come into clinic and I would be talking to them about like basic functional things, like what time do you go to bed? What time do you wake up? Are you getting any exercise? What are you eating? And they're reporting to me that they're on their cell phones all night long. 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, they have to get up for school, they're sitting on their cell phone. And when I would talk to their parents about it, there was this complete like disconnect. Well, you are the adult, you have to take the phone away. One of the first things I would tell these families is the phone cannot sleep in your preteen or your teen's bedroom. And what I was being frustrated by is I don't think you need the DSM to tell people some of those things. But
But now you have to have you're telling parents, you need to go set boundaries for your child.
Yeah, I
yes,
mean, we just live in a culture where like everything is a disease, everything has a quick fix, everything has a pill. I mean, I was watching TV in my hotel room last night, and there's commercials. Anyone under 30, maybe you don't know what a commercial is, but there used to be these interruptions between every few minutes of your show. Anyway, it was a commercial, and every other commercial was for some kind of drug. This commercial was for opioid addiction, but the same people make the opioids. So it's like, I mean, our whole culture is about quick fix. Everything's a diagnosis. I mean, nobody wants to actually be accountable for themselves and the way they're raising their children, where everything's got to be, catastrophized and medicalized. It's crazy. I sound like an old woman, is that what you're saying?
We all sound like old people.
Yeah.
well, okay, I'm going to be the first to admit, I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. They got cell phones way too young, way too young. And by 2, 3 years ago, God, this is gonna sound terrible. I pretty much gave up with the cell phones. Like the 17-year-old, he's pretty much had free reign, whatever, use of his cell phone since about 15. Um, because in some ways I didn't think I could claw it back by then. I now have younger kids, they're not getting a cell phone. I can't imagine giving them a phone. Maybe when they can drive a car, they can get a ladybug cell phone that only calls me. But I didn't set the boundaries either. It became too, it was like it would have become, the entire fight would have been.
Well, it's everywhere in our culture, and also like, how are parents going to tell their kids not to be on their phones all the time when we are all on devices all the time? I mean, we're all on devices right now. Yeah, look.
Well, okay.
Corey's practically over there making out with his phone.
Good thing nobody watches this. One of the challenges I found, even, and this was a few years back, so probably before a lot of Jonathan Haidt's like research was coming out or book was coming out, but I remember one time going to try to ground one of the older kids from the phone, and his response was, "Well, I still have to take it to school. It's the only way to get a bathroom pass." And I was like, oh, the only way that he could get a bathroom pass was on the cell phone, so he could show it why he's allowed to be in the hallway. And I'm like, I can't even ground you from your cell phone. This is.
Well, you could. They can just write a piece of paper. Oh well, hold it. Make sure you pee before you go in, and don't drink anything all day.
Okay, so I want to kind of go from this concept here. I've been leaning in more and more into nothing should be considered a mental illness except for things way on the far fringes. There's like a couple things, schizophrenia, I don't even know what other, catatonia, like what are the other true mental health illnesses that should exist in the DSM?
You don't think PTSD should be there?
Sure. But I just feel like, having read Abigail Schreier's Bad Therapy, just all that I experienced in the Gender Center, I was thinking more and more, these kids need nothing to do with mental health providers. They need to go outside. They should get off their phones, but they shouldn't be in psychotherapy. They shouldn't be ruminating. They shouldn't be pathologized. This was my feeling going into the Genspect conference. And I think that that's part of my gut feeling was, get the hell away, get mental health the hell away from children. So then bringing us to Genspect. So Cori and Lauren, you were there. First of all, Cori, you were a speaker. What did you talk about?
I spoke about how important narratives are at this point in the debate, and that evidence, the time for evidence is past. And when you were introducing SEGM, the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, I was like, there's no evidence to support gender medicine. We're past that. So I don't know how much longer SEGM is going to be in existence, because we may as well be looking for the Society for Evidence-Based
Yetis?
Cryptozoology, right? Where it's not I guess you could do it indefinitely, because you can always keep looking for evidence, but I think it's reasonable to conclude that there's not support for it at this point. And then I was linking that to how the narratives on the other side are shifting towards concepts around being your authentic self, that people have to become their true selves, and how it's developing more in towards this spiritual realization, spiritual fulfillment.
Okay. I will say, having not been there, I heard that yours was one of the best speeches given.
Yeah, but that was from our friend network where that was said, so let's take that with a grain of salt.
Lauren, did you hear Cori's speech?
I did, and I thought it was great, and I'm not your friend then. Huh.
Thank you.
No, it was great.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So then, I hate to say this, people are going to be mad at me, but in true Genspect tradition,
Uh-oh.
they hold a conference and a controversy ensues. So
Wasn't anything I was wearing, I promise.
if we remember Denver, there was conference and then it was controversy. The controversy that is ensuing or happened this time was because of a speech and then a press release that was put out right around the same time. So, did anyone listen to Mia's speech in person? You did. Okay. Cori, can you bring us into the room as she was speaking? And give me timing. Did the press release go out before she spoke?
Yeah, it went out in the morning.
Oh, did it? Okay. I didn't see it until after in the afternoon.
Okay. So a press release goes out.
Yeah, I don't think there's like any like gasps or anything. There was polite applause and nods and
Well, I
was,
think I think in her speech, Mia articulated the purpose of what, or the idea behind what they were doing much better than the actual press release. So I don't even know that people connected the two
I don't think that
right
there
away.
was a sense that anything controversial was happening. It was it's not that shocking to make the statement that depathologization of gender identity has caused problems. That wasn't really a controversial statement in the room because everyone has seen with their own eyes evidence that that's a defensible proposition. And calling for it to be repathologized, I don't think was considered that controversial either. It was like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, maybe it's time. Not, oh my God, what are these crazy people doing?
Yet, my first read of the press release, I was a little bit concerned.
Well, I think the press release, people were a little concerned. I had a few parents that said, I don't want my kid to be classified as a terrorist. And I don't think that that is what Genspect's intention was, but I think the lack of familiarity in this country with the term overvalued belief. Like we've never heard of this. This isn't an American concept.
Yeah,
And timing wise, it was also coupled with Trump. It was after the Charlie Kirk assassination. It was after the last school shooter was identified as trans, and the Trump administration trying to find ways to, I don't know whether you want to say go after, but kind of stop this, what they consider a social contagion and a kind of a cult-like mentality. So I think coupled with those two things, the extreme hyperbolic rhetoric from the Trump administration, and then the press release coming out with this very unfamiliar term that I think to Americans sounded like we're calling all these people radicals. Like,
Yeah, the language.
yeah, I think it was a language problem rather than intent problem.
And just to put it into context, you're right. This concept, the extreme overvalued belief, is actually a British concept that I think the Brits have been trying to use in their mental health system, but it never came over to the US. I mean, having worked, around the DSM, that's not something that I was ever familiar with. It's not a diagnosis I've never heard anybody be given. So it's weird to me because when I go back to what was going on at SEGM, in essence, I guess in theory, the concept extreme overvalued belief, the way I view it is these kids have been they're in a somatization disorder. They believe that they're ill with something that they're not actually ill with, that there's no biological basis with, there's no actual illness. Um, I just see a somatization disorder having it's already in the DSM. There's pathways to treatment already. It's one of the more stubborn illnesses. to treat, but I just don't think it holds what you're kind of saying, Lauren, is even just the word extremism. It just goes right into that like terrorist loop.
Right. I think because of where we like being in the United States, I think that's how it's going to be read. I thought that the way Mia articulated um why she thought this would be a good addition to the DSM was quite thoughtful in so much that, as she said, it because trans is a culture bound syndrome, you could use extreme overvalued belief as a catch for this particular thing right now, but that it could shift over time. Like, what's the next culture bound syndrome coming in? You could then apply it to that. I thought.
But Cori's original point was right, though. Like a lot of the DSM is just culture, like depression. I mean, even depression or anxiety, or a lot of these terms are just cultural bound.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that because, Americans basically our theme is why do when you can overdo.
Wait, America's theme is, tell me.
Why do when you can overdo? So if we have something like this that is, in my mind, a little nebulous, it could be applied to just about anything. And then next thing you know, we have people being diagnosed with this extreme overvalued belief for anything.
Punk rock.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because and not that it's the way she articulated it, I thought it was pretty it was very intelligent. And I know where she's going with it, but I think the problem is not her idea, but rather the way Americans do everything. And just the DSM itself has just, I mean, again, I'm just going to say it's the inmates leaving the asylum. Like,
could I read the definition for an extreme? Well,
yes,
what Genspect distributed.
Yeah.
So this is from their FAQ. So they say an extreme overvalued belief is a psychiatric concept first described by Karl Wernicke in 1892, or maybe it's Wernick. Used the term overvalued idea in 2019. Rahman and Abu Ghel further elaborated on the idea, coining the term extreme overvalued belief. So this is 2019. They are rigidly held false convictions. So in this case, it is I am a woman when you are not a woman, or I am a man when I am not a man, or I am neither a woman or a man when you are certainly one or the other. They are shared by others in a subculture or culture, so basically Reddit. They are relished by the individual and defended with passion, sometimes by shooting people. They appear rational to the person who holds them because they are reinforced socially. If you are a woman, if you say you're a woman, trans women are women. And over time, they become resistant to challenge and can drive destructive action either outwards in the form of violence or inwards in the form of medical interventions that severely impact health. So this is Genspect's, let's say, elaboration or spin on the term.
Okay, so then when you read that, unfortunately, this kind of sucks. This might be a really great concept, but the timing in America was not right. So when you're talking about, I mean, when you're talking about violence, when you're talking, I mean, like in the United States, like I mean, the timing just, it just wasn't.
I think that's why they were getting some pushback, is because to us here in America, all of this stuff is in the same soup, and we're kind of in this position where, like, we do have an administration that, although I really like that they're pushing back against the gender affirmation model and trying to protect kids, I don't know has a great finger on the pulse of like how they're being perceived by quote unquote the others.
I think it's not just the other side. I get what you're saying about perception on the other side. I think it missed the mark with parents here in the US. And the reason is, so before Charlie Kirk, there was a shooting here, and that shooting drove home or brought forward pain and fear in so many of the parents who have trans-identified kids. They have, and when I say kids, I mean young people. I mean the parents who have a 23-year-old who's trans-identified, that they're tenuously holding on to that relationship, or it's estranged, or their kid is living in like a house with like 8 other autistic trans-identified people. Those parents are in real daily fear for their child going off to have surgery. But I think that when that shooting happened, that other element of fear came forward, is that they don't want to be the next parent to be told your child just committed violence.
Yeah, and I also think that they don't want to see, because we are starting to see a shift. And I think that what they're also afraid of is the animosity towards their own kids, who essentially are victims, right? They don't want their kids portrayed all over the media as radical, violent, extremist shooters and the potential to kill everyone, because a lot of these kids, lights went out. A lot of these kids are not violent, but they are victims of this medical industry, therapeutic industry. And they would be fine if they could get real help, but they're not getting real help. They're getting affirmation into a delusion and hormones and surgeries being offered to them. So like the system itself is radicalizing these kids.
What do you think about the Zizians? Would they fit with this obsessive obsession?
Excess,
Yeah,
what is it? Excessive,
extreme
extreme.
obsessive belief.
Rigidly held false convictions shared by others,
Yeah,
that's self-reinforcing the violence. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Okay.
Those people are somebody's kids.
They are. But I'm saying, but what I'm trying to say is that the Zizians
Yeah.
are outliers. Most trans people are not radical, violent extremists. And I think the parents seeing what's going on in the media, the way trans is being talked about and associated with violence and extreme beliefs, they're afraid that even if, I mean, because again, a lot of these kids, even if they walked it back, may never resemble their birth sex. And I think the parents are afraid that the backlash to this trans movement is going to end up being so extreme that their children are targeted for violence themselves.
So I think my feeling here is that the concept itself, I'm not arguing that maybe the concept of an extreme overvalued belief might not be applicable. It very well might be applicable. But then I want to ask myself, does it advance our cause or help those who are part of the movement to roll that out at that time the way that it was? And then this is my other question, and um I I think these are really smart people talking, right? But then does Genspect or SEGM actually have any power to change? Like, did they do all of this and put this out, but there is not actually any power to change the DSM? Does Genspect actually have the ability to get this concept in the DSM?
Is that their goal?
Well, what was the press release saying? Isn't the speech kind of saying wasn't the speech basically saying the monster is that concept and that we've all been fighting the wrong thing?
Well, I guess one way to think about this is their press release, their viewpoint, their statement is a tactic, and so it raises the question: what's their strategy? What are they trying to change? What are they trying to accomplish?
That's what I'm saying, is that if the strategy is to change the DSM, I don't know that they
Why is
actually have
that?
the power to do that.
How do we think that that's their strategy? We're working backwards from the tactic, right? Actually, we have to work. We can work backwards from a number of things. At Genspect, they also released their new gender framework.
Okay.
So maybe they're not trying to change the DSM. Maybe they're trying to change something else.
Lauren,
Well, I think maybe, I don't know that they have any power to actually influence the DSM and what goes in it directly, but I think that their goal is probably a cultural shift. I mean, Mia talks about this a lot if you listen to their podcast, is that in the transition from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria, the you shifted from having disordered thinking about something to the distress being the problem. Right.
again,
So they
like, yeah,
pathologize the distress. And I think she's right.
yes,
Um,
I think
I,
conceptually,
and I'm happy for everyone to just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks if we can just stop this. But I think the most direct path, the only way to really stop this is we need to stop the medical interventions. And if that's through bans or insurance parity bills or social pressure, removing federal funds, I think we have to do everything we can to stop this medical pathway, because I don't think any of these other things will help until we take that off the table. Because honestly, even if you did repathologize it, we're also living in a time where like kids think it's cool to put every
yeah, everything is
diagnosis they have
pathology.
on their
Hell
Tinder
yeah.
profile. So they're like, yes, I'm trans, fine. I have an
I,
extreme overvalued belief, and I'm autistic, and I'm polyamorous, and I'm
well,
it's all this stuff. They have all these labels, and they're happy to be completely disabled. Like the more
is
disabilities you have, the better, honestly. So,
is polyamory in the DSM? Because I think you just
well, it should be.
okay.
I'm
So
just saying, there's an obsession with labeling oneself in a million different ways. And there's an obsession, especially on labeling yourself with certain disabilities or diagnoses. Like a lot of the younger generation are diagnosis happy, right? Like they're more than happy to be like, I'm neurodivergent, ADHD, physically disabled. Like they love it. So is repathologizing it even going to um, stop them from uh, believing it's this great thing? Like I think Genspect is looking to take it out of the realm of trans is natural and healthy, which I agree with, right? It's not, but even if we took it out of this cultural context of being natural and healthy, these kids are
the
still gonna
kids still want, yeah,
they
they're still gonna,
they're still gonna want the treatments. So, and they'd be, like I said, they'd be more than happy to identify themselves as this is another disability. I mean, Christ.
okay. So last night I'm falling asleep. I'm thinking about this, thinking about this, thinking about this, and I kept thinking about a train. So a train and train tracks and like the switch, like I don't know, I never have been a train engineer, but you can change the tracks, right? You bring the train back, you switch the track, and then you can move it forward on another pathway. So I kept thinking, okay, if we're discussing changing the DSM category or the illness name to address what's basically a cultural disease, I still think that this is akin to changing which direction the train may be headed. The kids or the trans identified people are still buying a ticket, they're still filling the train, and all we're doing is maybe moving the train into a different direction. Of course, me and my anarchist thing I wrote down, I would just rather destroy all of the future train tracks and force the train into an abrupt halt. And once the train can no longer move forward, the number of people, again, I think, Lauren, this comes back to your idea that if you just remove all of the medical pathway, the number of people seeking to board that train is going to drop dramatically if there's literally just no medical pathway. And those who sell the train tickets, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the mental health providers, the endocrinologists, those who are like, yeah, come on the train, we're going to move you forward. They're going to be put out of a job because there literally is no medical pathway.
Yeah. And then the good therapists can start doing their jobs. That's the problem, is that because there's a medical pathway, the good therapists can't do their jobs and the crazy people can just keep signing.
Okay, I don't know that. I think we could have a larger debate. Is there good therapists?
I think there are. I think that we should probably have some tighter guardrails around who is allowed to become a mental health worker.
You
But I do
think?
think I absolutely do. I mean, because a lot of them are batshit bananas.
Sure.
Can I
Are
can
you
I
sure
just
that we
share
didn't
a
get
quick
here because we have the guardrails?
can I share a quick batshit bananas story?
Why not?
Okay, I've had two experiences with therapists. One, PhD level psychologist, excellent. So I wrote a long Substack about this. I was sexually assaulted on an elevator years and years and years ago, and I developed this really intense inability to be able to get on an elevator, which some people would say that's your PTSD there, Cori. I think it made total sense. I couldn't get on an elevator. And then I'll add this other small piece, which is maybe too much information, but the elevator that I was sexually assaulted on smelled like urine because it was a public elevator at a public light rail train system. So I also developed this real terrible reaction to the smell of urine, and I couldn't get on an elevator. Went to therapy. It was very specific therapy to get me over those two things and to teach me pathways around them so I could get back on an elevator. You cannot really function in modern culture if you cannot get on an elevator. I was on like the seventh floor for work. You just can't, it just doesn't work. Um, it was productive and it worked, and I can ride an elevator to this day. So then, fast forward a number of years, some of our listeners know that I drink way too much coffee. I have a lot of acid reflux. And for a long time, I was feeling like I was choking because of probably the damage I was doing to my esophagus and from all that coffee. So I scheduled an appointment with a therapist and I went in and I said, listen, I feel like I'm choking all the time. I have, this stomach issue. I want you to help me come up with some ways so I can ignore the sensation. Like I wanted to be able to override because I was thinking about it too much. I was thinking about it too much. Oh, the words out of the therapist's mouth. This is really interesting. I think you were choked to death in your previous life, and we should explore how you died in your previous life.
That's intense. How'd you
Yeah,
get
see,
that?
like she would be the one of those few that I would say are batshit bananas and should not be meddling with other people's brains. Yeah.
Wait, isn't that just talk therapy though? Was her name
Yes,
Child?
yes, we're going to get to this next week. Is talk therapy benign? No.
No, no, it's definitely not. Especially if you're vulnerable.
Wait, what do you mean? Is it benign?
Does it have
That's
no?
not that's not the question in front of the Supreme Court.
Okay, we're going to have to table that because that's what we're going to talk about next week. But does talk, okay, I'm telling you to table it and I want to keep talking about it.
Mhm.
But in that therapeutic instance, I immediately, when that woman said that to me, I'm like, okay, you're crazy town. But then I will admit that I went home and I thought, shit, what if I was strangled to death in my previous life? What the fuck? Like, who killed me? Like, I thought about it for a minute, and I'm not an insane person. And I still went home and I was like, whoa. Um, And I never went back.
But were you still choking?
But that was one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna have to figure this out on my own. Like, but anyway, long digression. Um, let's go back to kind of wrap it up here. So, who has the actual power to change the DSM? DSM 6.
Well, whoever's on that committee, which we don't know who's on that committee. And we don't actually, do we know how you get appointed to the committee? Is it like the Psychiatric Association, they don't have like a vote, like who's going to be on the committee, right? So I imagine it's just like insider baseball.
It's
Where
kind
like
of insider baseball, but it's going to be, have you published a bunch of papers on this topic? Are you considered an expert on this topic? So that's how some of the people that we know previously were on that committee. Okay, Cori, you're great at doing predictions and then coming back on Twitter 3 years later and saying, ha 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 ha, I had it right.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a prediction here that DSM 6 is going to follow what the ICD 11 code is, which is basically to continue the process of depathologizing gender and continue the process of pushing. I don't see DSM 6 changing on this. That's my prediction.
Okay. You just got to register that now. You got to make a tweet that puts your foot down.
Okay. Do you either of you have any thoughts? Is gender still going to be in there? Or are we still going to see the medicalization in DSM 6? Probably out in 5 years or so, 4 to 5 years.
yeah, I don't think it's going to get less crazy in any way. I think, it just keeps getting, the DSM manual just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we just keep getting crazier and crazier and crazier. So I'm thinking, who knows? Who knows?
Wait, I maybe want to change my prediction.
I couldn't have seen that happening.
Well, there's one element that I think in the next couple of years might rein back in the DSM a tiny bit, and that's just around autism. I do think there's a large bit of public pressure around how many people are diagnosed with autism, how broad that diagnostic category has become. Maybe the DSM does some shifts around. Okay.
Oh, they probably will, but it won't be good. It won't be good for anyone who's actually autistic.
You don't think they're going to split it into back
I
to
don't think they're going to do anything that would benefit people who are actually autistic.
Okay.
Because now that's an identity too.
Okay.
And that's how they were speaking about it at the conference we went to, autism as an identity and not a diagnosable condition. These people are crazy.
All right, so in the end, we might be at the same crossroads psychiatry faced 50 years ago when they went to remove homosexuality. Are we describing a reality or reinforcing or enforcing ideology? And I don't know that anything that Genspect SEGM does will change the trajectory of the DSM. I just think that's the reality. Any closing thoughts on this or any preview thoughts or suggestions for people who want to listen next week when we talk about the Supreme Court case? Cori, you already gave out a good one. People can listen to the
Oye.
Oyez, O-Y-Z.
OYEZ.
OYEZ.org. Did you listen to it yet?
I've listened to about 30 minutes of it.
Okay.
And it's audio of the arguments?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's going to be it for this week's Informed Dissent. We want to thank our sponsors and colleagues. Special thanks to our producer, Leanne Owens, who keeps the show running, giving us lots of background, and to our research assistant, Heather. You can find the full newsletter, and the source links will come out in the show notes. And next week, again, we will be turning to the Supreme Court case, Childs versus Salazar, where the question isn't just about therapy or free speech or what makes bad therapy, but I do think it has some real concerns for LGBT people. Until then, stay informed and ready to dissent when needed. Thank you. Bye.